Wonderful. Yeah. So without further ado, I will also directly pass the word again to Oscar Salso, the head of the PATPA Secretariat, for his welcoming words. Over to you, Oscar, and great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Simone, and warm welcome from me to everyone here at today's webinar. Today, we are starting our webinar series. It's PTR time, the importance of biennial transparency reports in 2024. And this webinar is organized by the Secretariat of the Partnership in the Paris Agreement, short PATPA. My name is Oscar Zarzo, and I'm the head of the Secretariat of the Transparency Partnership. The PATPA Secretariat is hosted by GSZ within the frame of the support project for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, short SPA. We are an IKI-funded project, and as such, the PATPA initiative is commissioned by the Foreign Office of Germany. As you or most of you should know, 2024 will be a key year for the Paris Agreement architecture, as yet another piece of the system will enter into full force. And this is the Enhanced Transparency Framework. This year is marked by the submission deadline for the first biennial transparency reports from both developed and developing countries alike. All countries are mandated to submit these reports by the 31st of December of this year. And as such, it also implies for the first time common rules and standards for both developed and developing countries alike. In this context, PATPA has published several knowledge products on transparency and also on its linkages to other relevant processes within the Paris Agreement. Those knowledge products are available in several languages, and they all have the aim of supporting countries in their preparation to fulfill the requirements under the Enhanced Transparency Framework. This webinar series consists of 3 virtual events. Today is the first one, where technical input will be given. There will be also space for experience sharing and for a presentation of our, or some of our knowledge products. Not all of them, but some of them, the ones that we consider now more relevant this year. The first event, the main aim is to start as an introduction to the webinar series and to provide insights into the importance of transparency under the Paris Agreement. This first event will highlight the strong synergies between the Global Stocktake and the implementation of the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which are both key inputs for the next round of NDC updates and for the NDC update cycle altogether. Our second event will take place next week on Tuesday, next week on the 19th, and we'll focus on the requirements for the preparation of greenhouse gas inventories in general before delving deeper into a specific sector, the waste sector. And as a second part of the webinar will also focus on another of the mandatory requirements under these biennial transparency reports, namely the importance of tracking progress by countries in the implementation and achievement of their NDCs. And we'll focus as such on another knowledge product of PATPA that focuses on the indicators for tracking progress on NDC implementation. Our third and last event of the series will take place on Wednesday, 20th of March, and will present a tool that was published a couple of years ago by PATPA in a joint effort with the FAO, which is the Biennial Transparency Report Roadmap Guidance and Tool. In the first part of that third session, the tool will be briefly presented, and during the second part of that session, representatives from countries that have applied our tool will share their experiences with us and also how they are working towards submitting their first biennial transparency report by the end of this year. And now, before I hand over to my colleague Simone, I would like to give you some brief background information on the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement. This is an initiative that was founded in 10, 14 years ago by the governments of South Africa, South Korea, and Germany, and that was launched at the Petersberg Climate Dialogue in that year. The aim of the partnership is to promote ambitious climate action through political dialogue and exchange among practitioners. Since its establishment, new challenges have arisen as a result of the new enhanced transparency framework that is in place since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. And PATPA is now continuing to provide support by hosting practical exchange between developing and industrialized countries, and also providing an informal forum for discussion on topics such as the climate change negotiations, focusing on the topic of transparency, but also addressing some other issues, and by hosting numerous regional workshops in its 5 regional groups, clusters, which are the Asian group, Anglophone Africa, Francophone, or the cluster Francophone, Latin America and the Caribbean, Spanish-speaking countries in the region, and the Lusophone cluster. PATPA is also active at the global level, and this year it will be hosting a global BTR dialogue and a partnership meeting on the margin of the SPs in Bonn. I'd like to finish with these words, and I'm very happy to welcome so many participants today on this important topic, and I hope that you all will enjoy the webinar and learn and get some new insights from it. And with that, I hand over to Simone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for your welcoming words, and also a very warm welcome from my side to all participants and speakers of today's session on transparency and also its benefits and interlinkages with NDCs and the global stocktake. My name is Simone Gotthold, and I also work for the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement, PATPA. And within PATPA, I am coordinating the cluster Lusophone, so the cluster for Portuguese-speaking countries. But today I will be moderating this event and thus lead you through the session. And I'm really thrilled about the high number of participants. We're almost 80 participants now in the call. So it's great to see the huge interest on transparency topics under the Paris Agreement. And yeah, warm welcome to everyone. As mentioned, also earlier, the objective of this virtual event is to highlight really the importance of transparency under the Paris Agreement and connect it also with the NDC update cycle and the global stocktake. For this reason, we have 3 distinguished speakers here with us. And I will now guide you quickly through the agenda before I give them the floor. So first, we will hear from Cristina Urrutia about what transparency under the Paris Agreement actually means and about its relevance. Building on this, Marlon Pillay will present the benefits of transparency on national and international level. And to finally round off the session, Lorenz Moosmann will break down the relevance of transparency and explain why especially this year, 2024, is a pivotal year for transparency. And of course, after these 3 inputs of our transparency experts, we will also have a Q&A session where you, all participants, can address your questions. And yeah, you're also invited to already during the presentations to write your questions in the chat. Then we will follow up with them later on. Okay, I'm not sure, is Christina already here with us? Lorenz,
Hello, this is Lorenz. Hello from my side. Christina was online and left again, so it seems she has problems accessing. Let's give her a few seconds. And what I would suggest, Marlan, basically we have 2 overarching presentations in the beginning. If Christina does not make it, Marlan, if you could prepare that you hold your presentation. In the meantime, I will check with Christina to get her online, and then she would hold her presentation afterwards. So she was online, and but I don't see her in the list of participants right now. So Marlon, if that's okay for you, maybe you get ready for your presentation, and I will check. I will try to get Christina online.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
thank you very
sure.
much, Lawrence. Marlon, then I will introduce quickly um, yourself, but of course you can also add whatever you want to share with all the participants. Yeah, we're very happy to have you here because you're working on in the UN Climate Change Secretariat already since 2010. And since then, you served in capacities such as the Clean Development Mechanism and Joint Implementation Accreditation Lead and Technical Assessor. And you are also an officer supporting developing countries to enhance their capacities to meet their reporting commitments under the Climate Change Convention and the Paris Agreement. And last but not least, you're also supporting the climate change intergovernmental negotiation process. We're very happy that, you will explain us all the benefits that transparency brings on national and international on the national and international field. So over to you, Marlon, and thanks for your flexibility as well.
Okay, sure. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. And I'm very happy to be joining you here from Bonn and sharing with you some of the benefits that's been captured in the technical paper. So what I am going to do is to turn my camera off and then share the presentation so you can see the presentation. Okay, and then we will start immediately. Okay. So can you see the presentation clearly?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk to you today about the benefits of climate transparency. And this benefits is based on a technical paper that has been developed by PATPA, the UN Climate Change Secretariat, as well as many other partners. And so it provides a wealth of information for you so that you could have a look at the benefits of putting together your transparency, climate change transparency reporting system, and what can you expect to get out of it. Now, the key benefit for implementing the enhanced transparency framework is that you will build strong institutional arrangements. Now, this is highly important because what this means is that you are going to be able to get partners, stakeholders together and get their trust, get their commitment, and get their support for you to be able to get the information that you need to fulfill the reporting requirements. But by doing that, you're also going to be encouraging them and to get involved in taking climate action in the country. Now, besides building the stakeholder relationships, you're going to also be able to help your decision makers because, as you know, deciding on policies, measures, strategies, goals, targets is never an easy thing to do. And so it very much requires some degree of good information. And by having your enhanced transparency framework reporting system in place, you will be able to provide the evidence and the scientific basis in terms of the country's national circumstances for your decision makers to take climate action. And then you will see that you will and be by having your enhanced transparency framework in place, you will be able to improve the quality of the information and the quality of the reports that you provide over time. So this is really the key benefit of implementing your ETF. Now, additional benefits, some of which can be that you would improve the buy-in from the higher level political levels in government. You'll also be able to improve your access to support, because support providers will be able to see what is it that you are doing, where the country is in terms of its climate action and its challenges with respect to climate, and then how they can best support that. You will also be increasing awareness amongst your stakeholders, and you'll be exposing yourself to really a lot of the capacity building activities that will be needed. So you will have a starting point, and to improve, there are many capacity building initiatives now. One example is the capacity building initiative for transparency by the GEF, where you can build not only your reporting system, but then also use that data to develop projects for taking climate action. Now, in the technical paper, there's a number of case examples that has been described. And these are some of the aims of those examples that has been described. And perhaps we take one here that's quite important, is the strengthening of gender mainstreaming. And historically, as you know, that climate action has not been sufficiently taken sufficient consideration about empowering women in the decision making on climate action, and then in also the climate actions taken itself. So collecting data on how certain climate initiatives in the country impacts the empowerment of women is something that you could use your enhanced transparency framework to do, right? Now, sharing with you a few examples from the technical paper. So one, you will see there's an example from Germany, where they have been developing their climate action plans till 2050 to reduce the GHG emissions. And what they have done is they have based these targets and these projections on what they have in their measurement, reporting, and verification system. So this is using, it's an evidence-based approach, a science-based approach of being able to use that information then to make some policy decisions. Now, there's another example that we have of Egypt, where they are looking at, they have a sustainable development strategy in place. And one of their sustainable development strategies initiatives is about using their energy resources efficiently. And so what they've done is that they monitor the progress of, for example, transitioning to renewable energy sources to meet their energy needs. They use the information from their measurement, reporting, and verification system. Now, another example that we have from Dominican Republic, they have found that by improving on their climate change reporting, they were able to get more political buy-in for climate action. And Peru has put together their transparency system, where they also included a reward system for their stakeholders for their efforts to reduce GHG emissions and to take climate action. And by doing so, they hope to then encourage more participation from the private sector in carbon markets. So these are some of the examples that you will see in the technical paper. And these examples might inspire you to work towards improving your existing reporting system so that you can also realize some of these benefits and then perhaps also create awareness. You could use it to create awareness within your organization and with stakeholders on what benefits they will obtain by enhancing or improving the climate change reporting system. So I think I would leave it there so that we have some time to take any questions. And if you wish to contact me, my email addresses are here: CGE support or ETF support at unfccc.int. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlon, for your insightful presentation and highlighting the manifold benefits of transparency and also showing very concrete country examples. And I see that Merle also posted the link to our paper in the chat. So please feel free to download the technical paper, and it will also very soon be available in other language, not only English, but also in Spanish, French, and Portuguese. Wonderful. And I see that also our colleague Christina was able to join the call. Yeah, I would love to hand over directly to Christina. Christina works at Öko-Institut since 2019. And before that, she worked for the Ministry of Environment of Peru and for the Ministry of Environment of Germany, actively participating in the UNFCCC process until 2018. She is a biologist by training. And yeah, Christina, we are very happy to have you with us and that you will explain us what transparency entails or what transparency is under the Paris Agreement. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simone. Hello to everybody, probably in different time zones. I will now share my screen. You should be able to see it now.
Yes, we see
Yes,
it.
okay, wonderful. So I start. No, first the slide needs to move. Okay, so when we talk about transparency, what we are formally referring to is to the enhanced transparency framework established by Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. Article 13 defines the features of the ETF. I will now, from now on, use the abbreviation. And it also contains the obligations for parties. The ETF is operationalized through two decisions taken by the CMA, which establish the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, commonly known as MPGs, and the transparency guidance. Both decisions set out the details of what needs to be reported and how. The purpose of the ETF is to build mutual trust and confidence and, importantly, promote effective implementation. This slide lists key features of the ETF that you should know when you talk about it. Overarchingly, the ETF addresses action and support. It establishes common rules, the MPGs, for all parties. But It also provides flexibility for developing countries in light of their capacities. It has three main components: reporting, the technical expert review, the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. It is not a new creation, since it builds on previous arrangements under the convention. And in the context of the Paris Agreement, it serves as an input to the global stocktake. A final key feature of the ETF is that it was conceived with the notion to facilitate continuous improvement over time. In the next slides, I will go into some details regarding these key features. So one way of thinking about the ETF is to envision it as standing on two legs. And these two legs are action and support. And for each of these two legs, a specific purpose was defined, which you can see on this slide. So for action, the purpose defined was to provide a clear understanding, and for tracking progress towards the achievement of the party's NDC and its adaptation actions. For support, the defined purpose was to provide clarity on support provided and received, two aspects of support, and if possible, to provide a full overview of the aggregate financial support provided. The common modalities, procedures, and guidelines, and flexibility. So one of the achievements of the ETF is that established MPGs apply to all parties. They are common. And this was mandated by the Paris Agreement. So paragraph 13 of Article 13 mandates the adoption of common MPGs. And these were adopted in 2018 in the COP of Katowice. With their adoption, the same requirements applied to developing and developed countries, and that was a step forward compared to the system under the conventions. But to achieving this step, the notion and element of flexibility was introduced, which applies in light of capacities, because it was important to recognize different national circumstances and different starting points of countries. Since developed countries have much more experience with reporting in comparison to developing countries, it wasn't possible to fit everybody into the fixed same system, even if this ultimately, considering continuous improvement, will be the goal. Yes, also the MPGs give special consideration to the special circumstances of SIDS and LDCs. And on the slide, you see one example for a flexibility provision. And I put it in there because you need to get the notion that flexibility is not only abstract, it was really well concretely defined in the MPGs. So what you see there, it's a provision related to the projections of greenhouse gas emissions. And you see that developing countries that need it in light of their capacities, they can instead do X and Y. In this case, use less detailed methodologies. So this is the way in which flexibility is operationalized as well. Now to the three main components: reporting, technical expert review, and facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. So what you notice is that the scope of in each of the phases gets narrower. In the biannual transparency reports, parties include the information necessary to track progress on the NDCs, the national inventory report, the information on impacts and adaptation, and on support. Developed countries report on support provided, and developing countries report on support needed and received. The technical expert review, which is carried out by expert reviewer teams and produces a report that is publicly available, does not include the adaptation information. And the final step, the FMCP, it only focuses on information necessary to track progress and financial support provided. The FMCP consists of two phases. One, written question and answer phase where all parties can ask the party being considered specific questions about their BTR. And then a working group session where the concerned party gives a presentation and then answers questions posed by the peers. And all that information is publicly available, and the working group session can also be attended by observers. Here you can see how, in terms of reporting, the previous system and the new system work together. So the colors show you that the topics are the same, but there are issues that are not completely the same. Remember that the biennial reports and the biennial update reports, so reporting under previous old framework, will be replaced by the biennial transparency reports. But parties will continue to provide national communications because there are some aspects that are not covered by the BTR, but are covered in national communications. A quick view on the key component of the ETF, which is the BTR. There are two components in the BTR that are presided by a shall requirement. So everybody needs to report them. They are strictly mandatory. These are the national inventory reports and the information on tracking progress. And for developed countries, a shall requirement also applies to the information on support provided. The other requirements are should requirements. Yes, and also built-in capacity and improvement over time. Parties are expected to report on areas of improvement, but also the technical expert review helps to identify capacity building needs, and Article 13 establishes that support will be provided for capacity building. The relationship between the ETF and the Global Stocktake is quite simple. They are comparable in scope, hence the ETF serves as an input to the Global Stocktake. But the key difference is that the ETF considers individual progress and the Global Stocktake considers collective progress, so the information is aggregated. Now that we have focused on the ETF, I want to briefly give a picture on how it fits into the wider Paris Agreement and its ambition cycle. As you all know, parties need to provide new NDCs regularly, and these need to represent a progression over time. And it is the ETF that provides the key information to parties on how they did and then how they can plan and increase their ambition. Questions like, where do my emissions stand? What progress did I make with the policies and measures I planned? They are key for planning and adjusting new activities and raising ambition. And the Global Stocktake, which feeds off the ETF, needs also be considered as an input to the new NDCs. Finally, to consider we now have the ETF and we are building on it, and in 2024 we are expecting the new BTRs, but it was not always clear that we would reach this point of this having a shared framework for all parties, and for all parties being aware how important trust and accountability will be for the successful implementation of the Paris Agreement. And the ETF will ultimately give us a better picture of climate action, not only because of the increased frequency of reporting, but because of the wide participation. And with this, I give over to Simone, because she will specifically present the knowledge product.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Christina, for this very interesting and comprehensive presentation. I think everyone here in the call now understands better what the enhanced transparency framework is, and also, the flexibility that countries can have on when it comes to reporting. And as you may have already seen as well in the chat, my colleague Merle also posted a link to our PATPA knowledge product already in the chat. So based on what Christina just presented to us, we also have produced a knowledge product that is called Climate Action and Transparency under the Paris Agreement, which gives also a good overview of the national actions required under the Paris Agreement to prepare and update also the NDCs. And it explains also the tracking process in implementing and in achieving NDCs, so the transparency part of it, and also the role of long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies, in short LTLS or LTS. So feel free to access and download this publication as well, to dive even deeper into the topic and read through some more specifications of the enhanced transparency framework. Great, very perfect in time. And that's why I also want to directly hand over to Lawrence, our next speaker, who will highlight the importance of transparency for this specific year in the international climate context. So Lawrence Moosman is an expert for greenhouse gas inventories and projections, and he has participated in the UNFCCC negotiations in the area of transparency since 2017. He's an environmental scientist by training. And yeah, over to you, Lawrence. I think you will also share the presentation by your own. There it is. Now it disappeared again.
Thank you very much, Simone. I'm still working on the presentation. Probably just takes a second.
Yes.
Now everybody should see it.
Yeah,
thank you, and hello from my side. Thank you for your interest in this event. What I will do in the next few minutes, provide some thoughts about why transparency matters this year, and there are several reasons. If we look at it, the first one, of course, is that 2024 is the year when the first Permanent Transparency Report needs to be submitted. It's important for those of us who are involved in reporting for countries. It's not just very few people, it's actually a lot of people who are somehow involved in getting the data together and in getting the messages together, which then form the biannual transparency reports. It's a first for everybody. So this is really, like, from a reporter's perspective, that's the big thing, the first biannual transparency reports, and still a lot of work for us to do that. But there are also some other aspects, and I will say a few words about those. It's the role of transparency in the outcome of the first Global Stocktake, which just has been concluded. And then the role of transparency in the preparation of the new nationally determined contributions. That's another focus of parties to the Paris Agreement this year. And finally, also an outlook on the future role of the information reported under the transparency framework in informing the next global stocktake. So let's have a quick look at these points. First, the role in the outcome of the global stocktake. The global stocktake was concluded in December 2023, of course, it should say, with a call on parties to contribute to various global efforts. So that's the tripling of renewable energy capacity. There is also a global doubling related to energy efficiency, and then also other sectors. So efforts in the area of phasing down unabated coal power, and then sectors such as transport and also non-CO2 emissions. So there was an agreement on specific global efforts, which are part of the decision on the global stocktake. And now, what was the role of the reported data? Climate change related data has been reported under the convention for many years, both by developed and by developing countries. And these data, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, they helped develop the messages of the global stocktake. So also in practice, those reports under the convention were available. Organizations like the UNFCCC Secretariat, but also other organizations summarized and synthesized this information. This was then used as an input to the technical dialogues and then fed into the final discussion and then helped agree or help define the outcomes of the global stocktake. So that's kind of the input of reporting into the first global stocktake. And then on the other hand, where is transparency addressed in the decision on the global stocktake. And there's a paragraph which emphasizes the critical role of the full implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. So that's the most specific section of that decision, which refers to the transparency framework. So that was a look back at the outcome of the global stocktake. Now the question, what about the national determined contributions, which follow the global stocktake? They need to reflect the highest possible ambition of each party. So the challenge for the parties also this year is to determine ambitious yet realistic targets. And for this, the following information is needed. Most parties now moving towards greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And for defining those targets, you need to know information on the level of greenhouse gas emissions and removals in the various sectors. And for this, the national inventory is an important source of information, and that's a key part of the transparency framework. Then information on current and possible future policies and measures is needed. Again, this information is collected under the transparency framework or has already been collected under earlier frameworks when parties prepared their report under the convention. Then for defining targets and for estimating the effects of policies and measures, projections are used. Again, projections are part of the transparency framework, and many parties already prepared projections for their policy planning in earlier years. And finally, many NDCs include elements relating to adaptation. Under the transparency framework and also earlier, we have the collection of information on climate change impacts and adaptation. This information, again, is an important source for the parties when they plan the adaptation component of their NDCs. To summarize this role in the preparation of new NDCs, the information which is currently being prepared for the biannual transparency reports helps policymakers in the development of the next NDC. Now, these activities, they run basically in parallel. Both need to be largely finished this year. For the NDCs, it will be done beginning of next year that they need to be communicated. Now, since they're moving in parallel, it's really, it would be very good if regular exchanges took place between the experts responsible for the biannual transparency report and for those who are developing the next nationally determined contribution. So that was the second main aspect, which is important, especially this year. And now to the final aspect, and that's the role in informing the next global stocktake. There's still a few years until the next global stocktake starts. It will likely start in 2026, so a little more than 2 years from now. And national reports constitute a key input to the global stocktake. And by 2026, we will have biannual transparency reports. We will have 2 rounds of these reports. And as an example, greenhouse gas emissions reported by parties under the convention, they were already used for the current global stocktake. They were synthesized by the UNFCCC Secretariat and then provided for the technical dialogue of the first global stocktake. Then for the next global stocktake, biannual transparency reports need to be submitted by the end of 24 and 26. That means for the period starting in 26, in this moment, the first and second BTRs, they will constitute a key input. What kind of input? Let's have a look at some of the key inputs which I expect that will serve the next global stocktake. Of course, the national inventory reports, they will provide information on progress in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or increasing their removals. So they will provide information where parties are individually and then also collectively towards reducing emissions in this decade. Then there's a chapter on tracking progress. That's where parties compare where they are compared to their NDC targets. This chapter also contains information on mitigation policies and measures, also projection of greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of information which can be used in the global stocktake, also to see where parties are collectively towards the goals relating to mitigation. But the same is also true for adaptation. BTRs contain a chapter on climate change impacts and adaptation. So there's a should requirement to include such a chapter. And that's an opportunity for parties also to report on their information on progress towards their own adaptation goals, if they have some. And it becomes increasingly important because there's high interest in more work on the global goal on adaptation. There's a discussion on indicators, how to measure progress towards these global goals. And it will also be an important aspect of the next global stocktake. And finally, BTRs contain chapters relating to financial, technology, and capacity building support. This information will be important for the global stocktake when parties discuss the topics of means of implementation and support to developing countries. So that's an overview of all of the various aspects of biannual transparency reports, which are related to the global stocktake, to NDC implementation, and also to the next global stocktake. With this, I would like to close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence, for your great presentation. So now we would have time to actually address your questions from the participants. So please feel free to just raise your hand and ask your questions here in the plenary, or also write your questions in the chat. Yeah, we've heard now from our distinguished speakers first what transparency actually is under the Paris Agreement, also its benefits of reporting for national level, and now, thanks to Lawrence, also the role and interplay of transparency with NDCs and the global stocktake. So if there are any questions, please feel free to come in. Also remarks, comments. Maybe you also have or want to share your country experiences. Yeah, I see Marlon. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, so maybe just a few additional remarks that I could add. So one on the global stocktake. And the global stocktake is sort of this mechanism that has a technical and a political context to it. Now, on the objective of the global stocktake is that we have the Paris Agreement goals, and we need to have a look as a collective how we are progressing to deliver on those goals, right? And then when we look at that progress, what is the actions that need to be taken? So you will see in our climate change negotiation process, there's lots of activity happening about global goal for adaptation, making climate finance flows consistent with the low emission development pathway and a climate resilient pathway, and then also on loss and damage. So to make these decisions, what is needed is a good quality of information. And that's where the enhanced transparency framework comes in, is that it provides, from the country perspective, what is the individual efforts in taking climate action and monitoring what is going on in terms of that taking of climate action in the country. So that is one of the why the ETF is so important. The second aspect is you will see in terms of the NDCs, the BTR as a component where it prompts sort of like a review of the NDC and what is happening in terms of reaching those targets that the country has set. Now we call this a structured summary in that chapter in the ETF modalities, procedures, guidelines. And so you will see there is the technical expert review process where a team of experts will have a look at that structured summary and provide inputs. And that's a very useful opportunity then to get expert feedback that you could then use towards your next NDC development or revision. And then you will see that there's the FMCP process as well, the Facilitative Multilateral Consideration of Progress. And that allows other parties to understand what is happening in a certain country in terms of their response to climate change through having a look at the biennial transparency report and including the technical expert review report. So I just wanted to highlight those two things and looking forward to getting some questions.
Yeah, thank you for breaking the ice, Marlon, and highlighting these two important aspects again. And I see, yeah, a big thanks in the chat for your great or fantastic inputs. And there are two questions now. So the first one, how is the progressive level of ambition in the NDCs concretely ensured? And second, could you please elaborate a bit on how the ETF ensures transparency against the background of quite different approaches to the compilation of GHG inventories? So thank you very much, Julian, for your question. Yeah, Lawrence, please go ahead.
Thank you. I am happy to respond to the second one. To the first one, maybe others would like to respond. My quick reply to the first question would be that the progressive level of ambition, it is provided by Article 4 of the Paris Agreement, that ambition has to be higher. And the way to check this is in the NDCs and also in the transparency reports, the targets and indicators to track progress are described, have to be described most likely in quantitative terms. So there are ways to check and then to ensure that there is a progression. So that's a quick reply to question one. And question two, compilation of greenhouse gas inventories.
Can I add to question one, so we don't have to go around? So I would add, as a response to question one, that it is also it has a political component to it, where parties influence each other. And on one side, we have the ETF that provides the tracking of progress, so we know the existing target, but for assessing what a new target is and whether the ambition level is higher, it also plays a role how the targets are described. So a clear definition of the NDCs is key for knowing whether this progression of ambition is actually taking place.
Thank you. For number two, the greenhouse gas inventories. So the rules for the greenhouse gas inventories, they are defined in the decisions under the transparency framework. So the MPGs, the decision from Katowice, and then also later decision in Glasgow. And it's very detailed on the greenhouse gas inventories. So things like that IPCC guidelines have to be used, which sectors, also information on gases. So I would say this helps in transparency. And as far as the approaches of countries are concerned, I think the national systems are very different, but the approaches, so how you calculate and how you present the greenhouse gas inventory information, there is not so much difference. And the reason is because we have those really common guidelines, the MPGs, which are applicable to all parties.
Thank you, Lawrence and Christina, for answering the question. And now we are receiving some more questions. That is great. One question from Helena Heukman. Do you think developing countries are ready to submit a BTR this year and a NDC update next year? And is there more technical support on the ground?
I can go for that. And I would answer in terms of two aspects. The first, it is ongoing work, and there are a lot of efforts to get developing countries to the finish line, to get them there. But the work is ongoing. And the support that was established through the ETF and the initiatives, they are ongoing, so helping there. And the other aspect is having in mind how important it is that the ETF gets going this year. So it needs to happen. And so the question of whether will they, won't they, not so helpful. Is they will, and then we will get the system going and have this this shift towards a working ETF that serves to build trust and accountability. There is no opting out.
Yeah, thanks for stressing that. And Marlon,
Yeah, just to add to that is that, yes, exactly, there's no opting out. There are many countries that have applied for funding from the Global Environment Facility to prepare their biannual transparency report. I believe now it's like over 70 countries. And in addition to that, they've also applied for capacity building initiative for transparency, CBIT funding for projects to improve their capacity for reporting. And so there's, in terms of that, so countries have then put in place their programs to develop those biannual transparency reports and provide it. Now, what is important is not just the finish line. What is more important is that countries are moving to that, and we are creating a positive momentum for countries to continue submitting so that no one is left behind. And then we also get more valuable information coming through that can be fed to other processes like the Global Stocktake.
Yeah, thank you, Marlon. And actually, PATPA is also supporting countries to submit their first BTR and to learn about the ETF already since many years now. And for instance, we have our regional workshop and language-specific groups where we offer a platform for exchange between the countries so that lessons learned and experiences, but also challenges can be shared. And we're also closely collaborating, as Marlon also mentioned, with CBIT, GSP, UNDP, and other support providers. So there is quite a lot of support available in the field, and yeah, there's no option to opt out, and we hope that many BTRs will be submitted by the end of this year. But having the time in mind, I see we're already running out of time. So thank you all very much for your participation in this first webinar of the series It's BTR Time. We would, of course, be delighted to welcome you also to our next events. The second event will happen already next week on Tuesday, March 19, and we will there focus on the requirements for your GHG inventories in general, before then delving also deeper into the waste sector. And in the second part of this webinar next week on Tuesday, we will also highlight the importance of NDC progress indicators and show the concept of creating smart indicators. And on the third and last event of the series on next week, Wednesday, so March 20, we will present the BTR roadmap and guidance tool, but especially also hear from country representatives how they are doing in applying the BTR roadmap tool and in general in preparing their biannual transparency report. So if you are interested in the upcoming sessions and you have not yet received an invitation, kindly let us know, maybe here in the chat or via email, and we will be very happy to forward it to you. And of course, we would be very happy to see you there again. And yeah, since it's 2:03 here in Germany, I do not have any more to say than thank you very much to you all, and thanks for attending the session. Thank you for this very interesting and insightful presentations from Marlon, Lawrence, and Christina. I think we all learned a lot, and yeah, hope to see you again, and have a lovely day. Bye to everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.